What is success? What does success look like to you? What image or description pops into your head when you hear this question? If you ask the person sitting next to you what their image looks like, do you think you'd both get the same answer? If your answers are different, is one inherently wrong? Who's to say which is right and which is wrong? In school, we're told to try new things, explore different areas. We're told to dream big. If someone said that their image of success looked like working in a lab trying to find a cure for cancer, would you tell them that their image of success was wrong? If another person said that their image of success looked like teaching people how to meditate and do yoga to cope with traumatic stress, would you tell them that their image of success was wrong? Most people would answer, no, of course not. We each get to define what success looks like to us, right? Now, what if you told someone what your image of success looked like, but instead they said, you're wrong for that image. You don't fit that dream, find a new one. How would you feel? Now, what if the person telling you that you're not good enough for your dreams was you? This has essentially been my experience most of my life. Since I was a kid, I had been telling myself to dream smaller because people like me, people with learning disabilities, could never fit those big dreams. I can remember wanting to be a doctor since I was 9. I can also remember being 10, sitting on the rug of my 5th grade English class when our teacher asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up. I remember watching the girl sitting in front of me as she launched her hand in the air, practically leaping out of her crisscross applesauce, saying, I want to be a doctor. I remember sinking lower into my crisscross applesauce, thinking to myself, I wish I could be a doctor. Since I was 10, I had been telling myself to find a new dream because people like me, people with disabilities, could never do the dreams that I wanted, at least none that I knew of. All throughout adolescence, there was this voice inside my head telling me to dream smaller. Self-doubt isn't uncommon in people with learning disabilities, especially when you're a kid and you don't understand why something comes so easy to everyone else, yet feels impossible to you. My dad has dyslexia and ADHD like myself. My mom also has ADHD, both of which are genetic. So it's no surprise when I started showing signs for learning disabilities early on in school. They have been there every step of the way, trying to help me change this narrative in my head that I could dream big. But I still struggled with self-doubt. Over and over again, my everyday experience felt like a slap in the face, telling me that I was not good enough to achieve success. What made it even harder was when the people around me told me the same thing. In high school, I had this career coach who I'd been working for a few months. She was helping me practice interviewing for jobs when she asked me to tell her about a time that I overcame a challenge. I told her about my experience with learning disabilities. I told her how I had to work twice as hard as everyone else around me just to keep up, but that I was doing it. I was proud of how hard I worked. I thought she would be too. But instead she said, you really shouldn't tell your future employers that you have disabilities, and it'd be in my best interest if I kept that to myself. It wasn't until I was 16 when I finally let myself admit that I wanted to at least try to pursue a career as a medicine. That was after I spent the entire year pursuing every other field I thought I might be interested in, but couldn't keep lying to myself that I wanted to do any of those things. So I finally let myself admit that I wanted to give it a try, but I still struggled with this idea that I couldn't succeed. In high school, I became friends with this counselor. She and I would have meetings during lunch, but it really just meant we could put up the sign on the door that said, meeting with a student, come back soon, and we could sit and chat. Or at least we could until there'd be an urgent knocking at the door and someone would poke their head in and say, sorry to interrupt, but one of your students tried setting a fire in the hallway again, and she'd have to run and go deal with it. During one of these chats, I was telling her about how we had an assignment in art class, and we were supposed to draw a self-portrait of ourselves, and we're supposed to write these words around our head that felt meaningful to our identity. I told her that I didn't know what words to write. Our conversation moved on, and I was telling her about college searches, and eventually I said, I don't know if I'll ever be successful. She had this crooked look on her face when she asked, what do you mean? I said, I'm not like the other students around me. I'm not like the others that want to go pre-med. I won't ever be successful. She asked me, what is success? Does it only look one kind of way? She was trying to push me to break free of this perspective that success only looked one kind of way. That actually ended up being the words that I wrote for my self-portrait. Now, my parents have been trying to drill this narrative in my head for 17 years already, but you know what it's like being a teenager. You know, your parents say something, you're like, okay, mom and dad, and then someone else says, and you're like, you think they're a genius. Growing up, my dad had always told me, you're a square peg trying to force yourself into a round hole. You're beating yourself up about not being a circle peg when it's okay to be a square peg, and it's okay to have a different path. What he wanted me to learn from this was that it's okay to be different, and it's okay to have a different path. Fast forward, I became a freshman at TEDxStOlafCollege pursuing pre-med, which of course came with its challenges. As a student with disabilities, you learn to maximize your resources. I went to every office hour. I went to every tutoring or group session that I could. I worked with other students in the class as much as possible. I was getting all A's. It was great. And then COVID happened. I had none of the resources that I had used to help me do well in school. I was out of my depth with no tools to accommodate me. I was struggling. I was meeting often with his career advisor, and one day I decided to open up to them about how I was struggling in my classes and how I didn't know how to be a student with disabilities in this new environment. Desperate for encouragement or advice, instead they said, you should just quit already and become a nurse. For a student who was riddled with self-doubt, with no hope that they'll ever succeed, it hit hard. I'd begun filling out transfer applications to new schools because I was convinced I had to move back home, start all over again, find a new dream. But that was when I found SSSD. SSSD stands for Student Support Services for Students with Disabilities. It's a federally funded TRIO program that helps students with disabilities across the country, and it just started at St. Olaf that spring of my sophomore year. I will never forget my first SSD meeting. It felt like a breath of fresh air after breathing smog for so long. For the first time, to see other students with disabilities on this campus, to have advisors wear their disability proudly on their sleeve, to have people tell me, you are not alone in what you are experiencing, to have an advisor say, you have people in your corner. I never felt so uplifted. For the first time in a long time, I had hope. After that, I knew I wanted to work for SSD. And I've been a peer leader since the position first started fall 2021. My boss once explained that SSSD is designed to help students with disabilities to succeed in a system that wasn't designed for them. And the statistics reflect this. And these statistics were prepared by Lauren Filer from the Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment Center at St. Olaf, data provided by Lauren Noble-Peel from the Academic Success Center. DAC stands for Disability and Access Center. DAC provides students with disabilities with the accommodations that they need. In 2017 to 2021, students with disabilities had a retention rate of 85.7%, and students without disabilities had a retention rate of 91.4%. And the graduation rate for students with disabilities was 74.1% versus 82% for students without disabilities. And then this graph shows how students with disabilities has increased tremendously over the last 10 years. So obviously, I wasn't alone. So I wanted to talk to other students to find out if they were experiencing the same things with me. I started by talking with the peers in the disability community. One student said that they had an advisor who told them to quit now because they'll never make it in medicine. Another student said that they had asked their professor to uphold their accommodations, but that professor told them to drop their class instead. I was shocked, but also very validated in what I was experiencing. I then turned to peers and acquaintances in similar career fields, and I wanted to know what they were experiencing. They shared similar experiences and interactions. Now, they weren't students of disabilities, but they were students of other marginalized identities. They were BIPOC, first gen, low income. I was taken aback. Coincidentally, not long after these conversations, my professor was teaching my sociology class about matriarchies. We were studying cases of successful matriarchies in the world and comparing the differences between matriarchies and patriarchies. The patriarchy is the current social system with which we reside in. In a patriarchy, men primarily hold positions of power and leadership, dominate decision-making, and have control over property. In a matriarchy, women would hold primarily dominant positions of power and leadership, dominate decision-making, and have control over property. The key focus here is looking at the differences between their power structures. And a patriarchal power structure is the structure of a pyramid. It means that power is viewed as finite. It's a zero-sum game. It promotes competition, aggression, intimidation, winning, all unhealthy. It promotes that you can't help other people because power is viewed as finite. If you help others and you're giving your power away to other people, it views that you can't make room for other people at the top because then there'll be less room for you. This is completely the opposite to a matriarchy. In a matriarchy, the power structure is a sphere, or think of it like a penguin huddle. Everyone rotates who's on the inside and who's on the outside so that everyone gets the chance to be warm. In a matriarchy, power is not viewed as finite. It means that in successful matriarchal tribes, their greatest strength is their ability to help others and to protect the vulnerable. They're able to do so because they don't view power as finite, so they don't view as helping someone else as giving away their power. In this power structure, you can't fall out of the power structure if you fail, unlike if you fail in a pyramid. After learning about these key differences, our professor asked us to consider a problem within our community and think about how viewing that problem in a different lens might offer new solutions that looking at it through the lens of a patriarchy has not provided. What instantly came to mind was this similar experiences of students of various marginalized identities and feeling like they can't get a seat at the table. That was when my anthropology professor and I started talking. Because in a patriarchal structure, students of marginalized identities are most at risk of falling out. They need people around them to help them to be able to reach the top of the pyramid in order to succeed. But in a structure that is designed to tell us that helping others is our greatest detriment, those students are not able to do that, and those students are at the greatest risk of falling out. But in a matriarchal power structure, those students aren't at risk of falling out. Because a matriarchal power structure views helping others as your greatest strength, they're able to help those students get the help and support they need in order to reach the top, in order to reach their dreams. In a matriarchal power structure, it means that no one would ever get told that they're not good enough for their dreams. If we incorporated these core values of empathy, power is not finite. Helping people is your greatest strength, and it is important to help those who are most vulnerable in your community. We could ensure that everybody would get the same opportunities. It means that no one would ever get told that they're not good enough for their dreams. Not even the person looking back at you in the mirror would tell you that you're wrong for your image of success. It means that you can be any shape. You don't just have to be a circle peg in order to succeed. Whatever shape you are, whatever your path looks like, you are more than enough to achieve your dreams. It means that you are living in a society that tells you it's okay to be different and it's okay to have a different path. Now, I don't have all the answers, but I invite great minds to work with students with disabilities and students of various marginalized identities to come together to design a curriculum that incorporates all of these things to ensure that no student would ever get told by themselves or by others to dream smaller ever again. Thank you.